How do you identify within the LGBTQ plus community?
I identify as bisexual.
I identify as bisexual.
Were you raised religious? Are you religious now?
I was raised as a Catholic, so I attended a private grade school. So from K through 8, I attended St. Bruno Catholic School, and I went to public school after that, public high school, but I remained Catholic and I still identify as Catholic.
So I was raised religious, and I went to Catholic preschool, and then I continued to be enrolled in Catholic education for 8 years, so from 1st to 8th grade, but I am not practicing anymore.
Have you ever felt as though your religious identity or background and your sexuality were at odds? If so, how have you managed this conflict?
Okay, to answer the first question, yes, definitely. Catholicism preaches that basically anyone in the gay community is not that they're not welcome, it's just that being gay is a sin, and sin is very, it's like one of the greatest teachings in our belief system and something that we try to strive to not do. So because being gay is a sin, that's like negated from the whole entire Catholic religion. And how do I cope with that? I'm still Catholic. I mean, I know it's like a juxtaposition kind of, because I'm gay, but I'm also Catholic. I don't know. I just keep going to church, keep going to mass. I keep praying. I just keep going. There's nothing really else.
I think growing up, I'm not necessarily sure if it's just Catholic school or anything, but I think that kids have the tendency to make homophobic comments, like, oh, like he's so gay or she's a dyke. And I experienced a lot of that throughout middle school and even during high school as well, which was not religious affiliated. But I think that is when your sexuality kind of gets at like an odd with your religion in a way, if you're enrolled in Catholic school and you have people constantly saying these things around you. And also, when you get to a certain grade at my Catholic school, I think it's like 7th grade, we start learning about sex education. Well, that's what they say, but it's mostly just talking about chastity and abstinence, and it was like when you find a husband or when you find a wife, or like it was mostly like telling the boys when they find a wife, and the girls when you find a husband, you have to refrain from sex until marriage, or you could go to hell, or it's like a huge sin and it's a huge deal in the community. It wasn't actually talking about health, like safety with sex, but mostly just abstinence, which was very problematic.
Has your church or religious community ever made you feel as though you were less than because you were bisexual?
Yes. So, I mean, you could kind of tell, like being in the Catholic Church, you can kind of tell that it wasn't okay. But growing up in a Catholic school, we never really talked about it. It was seen as very taboo. Like sexuality, sex in general, was not a topic that we did talk about quite often. But going into, like, my father was raised evangelical / like Protestant. So whenever I would go to his church, they would talk about it a lot because it's such a prominent thing now in our society. Like, everyone's aware of this community, and so it's like now more talked about in the church, specifically like the evangelical or Protestant church, and they made it blatantly aware to me as a kid that being gay is not okay, basically. Like, not that you were excommunicated or anything, but it just wasn't acceptable in the community.
I would say no, just because I didn't realized that I was bisexual until later in high school, so at that point I wasn't enrolled in Catholic education. But I think that growing up in that school, we didn't really talk about people being gay or bisexual or having any other sexual identification. But I just think that the fact that it took me so long to realize it was that I wasn't exposed to people who were not straight, because in my school everyone just like kind of assumed that they were straight, and I assumed that I was straight for a very long time too. Just, I don't know if it was because everyone around me was, and that was kind of the atmosphere, you know, talking about boys constantly, or that I just thought maybe like at the time I just wasn't thinking anything other than being straight. So I don't think that it made me feel less than. I think it just made me take more time to realize that I was bisexual.
Do you think you being bisexual has influenced your experience within your church?
Yeah, yes and no. So, me identifying the way I do, it's only, like, because I am who I am and I'm, like, okay with who I am, being Catholic and being bi, it has, like, I never am uncomfortable in my church unless someone makes me uncomfortable. So, I always feel at home in my church until someone makes me otherwise. So...
No, but only because I didn't realize it until I stopped practicing. But I know I have like a friend who I went to Catholic school with, and he is gay, and it also took him a really long time to realize he was gay, and we've had this conversation more recently actually, and he was saying how he didn't think that he was gay until freshman year of high school, and he was still in a religious affiliated school, but they were more open, and my school was very small, so I only had 27 other kids in my class, and his new school has hundreds, and it's all men. He goes to an all-boys Catholic school, and that's when he realized that he was gay. I think because he met more gay people there through the theater program, and so we were talking about it, and he was like, everyone else knew that I was gay in our Catholic school except for me. And I think that was really funny because he was also pushed with the idea that he had to be straight as well. And it's actually really funny because in 6th grade we pretended to date for a few days, and it made our whole entire grade go crazy, and then all of the boys were asking out the girls. And at the end of a few days, my friend Nolan and I kind of just were like, oh, it was completely a joke. And that's what started all of these like middle school relationships in my grade, which is really funny to look back on.
Have you had more positive or negative experiences regarding your presence in the Catholic Church? Why do you think that is?
So, because no one really knows that I am bisexual in my church, it doesn't really affect, like, I only get negative feedback from the greater church, like just like the priest, for example, when he does sermons or homilies or whatever. Sometimes he'll talk about, if the scripture for that day is regarding like sexuality, he will, you know, go off on a tangent about like how being gay is not okay, and I will only receive negative feedback within myself. Like I understand, but no one else knows that, because no one else knows that I'm bi in my church except for me. So from the outside, it's totally okay. Like, I'm able to be a youth minister, I'm able to be a part of junior corps, I'm able to be, you know, a leader for a lot of kids, and it's not negative.
I think that I had a lot of positive experiences in the Catholic Church, just because it's kind of, I started so young, and I mean, I don't practice anymore, but I don't practice not necessarily because of any bad experiences I've had. I just don't think I agree completely with the morals of the Catholic Church, and just some other things, and I didn't really go to church on my own. It was mostly my parents, and I think that growing up, you start making your own decisions. But I mean, I did a lot with the Catholic Church. I was in a lot of religious plays and things like that, which were great opportunities for me. So I don't think that it's a negative atmosphere necessarily. I just think that I grew away from it.
How do you combat homophobia in the Catholic Church?
I feel like I surround myself with Catholics that, younger Catholics. I surround myself with like the youth of my church. So in that sense, because they grew up in a time period that's very accepting, where everything is not as taboo as it was, even before we were born, it isn't a big problem. Like me being, if I were to tell, like, for example, one of the kids in my youth groups that I was bi, like, it wouldn't really faze her. Like, it'd be like, oh, okay, cool, that's fine, like, what, like, I don't care, because it's a normal thing. But with the older generation, it's not as normal because they take scripture more literally. They don't see the Bible as like a fluid, living, breathing document. They see it as just as is, and we're supposed to take it like that. But in scripture versus specifically like Leviticus, I forget what the verse and the chapter, but it says that man shall not lie with man as he does with a woman. People take that literally, but in my head, I take it with a grain of salt. I take a lot of things with a grain of salt in the Bible. It just depends on how you, I guess, interpret it.
I think that it's not necessarily the Catholic Church that is to completely blame for the homophobia. I think that there are things put in the Bible that is very problematic that they could easily go and take out, but I think it starts a lot with people who are homophobic, who associate themselves with the Catholic religion and preach it, connecting it to Catholicism. And I think that once you start addressing those people and you start questioning their beliefs, then that's when homophobia can start to be eradicated. Because I don't think, as long as it says in the Bible that like a man should not lay with another man, I think that that's going to be problematic, but it's very difficult to just take that out. So if you want to eradicate homophobia, you have to start with people who are homophobic, and then they can start to invalidate those passages in the Bible. But I think that is how you kind of fight homophobia.
Mm-hmm.